Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets battled at home against the Sacramento Kings, but came up short. We break down why the strategy was correct. It was the execution that failed them in the end.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends. It is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings. From DraftKings to FanDuel, he's got you covered. I'm Adam Arbert, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast and the Devils on the Devils Puck Luck podcast. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all those great platforms. And we let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And Doug, we start this off, I think, by saying it's disappointing to lose the game, but from an X's and O's standpoint, from having a plan coming in, there was a lot that I liked. I just wish that it happened on the scoreboard.
Yeah, man. Look, it's a brutal loss. The Nets, drop another one here. I don't want to gloss over the fact that they've just, lost a couple games in a row. Both, maybe the Thunder wasn't as winnable, but they were winning that game. Just kind of dropped off. In this Kings game, they're in it, and they especially come back late and they're storming back. And those are always sometimes the hardest ones because you feel like there was possibly a snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, to some degree. I agree with you, and we'll talk about it, where the Nets, I think they had some strategic pieces that were actually totally correct in this game, and in a lot of ways proved that they were right. I mean, there's a lot of things you can point to in this one that was like, hey, they did a lot of things correctly. The problem is there's some themes that have gone on all season long with this team that rear their ugly head in such a terrible fashion in this game. That is ultimately the reason they lost. So it's definitely the tale of two games from that piece. But you can't ignore the fact that the Nets have had troubles with very specific parts of the game this season, and to some degree, this Kings game exemplified sort of all of them, right? Yeah. And like problems they had even going back to KD Kyrie. Like this game was really, really problematic. We'll get into it all. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, definitely going to point out some things we really liked because there clearly were some. But if you've been watching this team all season long, you're ripping your hair out. I got to wear the hat for this one because I can't show. I got nothing left. Like you're ripping your hair out. Like,
when the game started
all season long with some of these same problems for this team, which we'll get into.
Yeah, 101-96 is the final here. And I mean, that's almost the jumping off point. When you see a box score like that, the Sacramento Kings, they are the highest scoring offense in the NBA, 121 points a game. If you look down and you say you held the Kings to 101, chalk it up to a victory. Like you would assume that a lot of things went right for you. Unfortunately, and let's stay on the strategy piece of this to start here. They made a change when it came to defensively and how they wanted to approach Sabonis, the elephant, the one-word elephant in the room that seems to constantly rear his ugly head, whether it was with the Pacers or now with the Kings against the Brooklyn Nets. They switched up their strategy. When it came to switching, it was right. Unfortunately, that key thing that you're speaking to, which is rebounds, was really the main issue that I think you can get confused about saying, oh, they should have done something different. No, it was right. They just couldn't secure enough rebounds to make that be the correct decision and to reward the correct decision from the team.
Yeah, look, not to bury too hard here. The Kings are the best offense in the league this year. Like, it's kind of not all that close. 116.9 offensive efficiency. That's like the best ever offensive efficiency. Now, offensive efficiency is way up across the league this year. So this year's built a little different when it comes to overall offense. But this is like the greatest offensive efficiency team like we've ever seen. The Nets held them to 100. The Nets held them to 101 points. Like, that's not nothing, right? Like, this is that's a feat. Like, and it wasn't just like luck. They had a specific strategy. You mentioned the switching. It was very clear early on that they did not want Sabonis to get them they didn't want the Kings to be able to take advantage of their full switching scheme, which they usually run. We've seen centers feast on this, where they get the switch on the pick and roll, and then the center either rolls or just seals off the smaller defender. Like we saw this with Ayton a bunch of times, with Phoenix. Like anyone who has offensive acumen is just going to seal off the smaller defender, get the ball in the post, repost, and cook. They actually didn't switch a lot. Like they came over almost everything and tried to keep Claxton home as much as possible, and then later DFS home as much as possible on Sabonis. I got to be honest, it mostly worked. Now, Sabonis was really efficient in this game, but he still only got up 14 shots in 39 minutes. Like it wasn't like he was a super high usage guy. I thought that strategy was correct. It actually, in some ways, threw the Kings off of what they want to do in the pick and roll with Sabonis and guys like Fox and Monk. Like, so I get they lost, but it's like, hey, that strategy, I think, like from a coaching standpoint, I think that was correct, right? Like, it was they limited the offensive touches for their best offensive player. They kept overall initial shots down. The looks were not amazing. Like, and that strategy, I think, was pretty correct. And it was very obvious. Look, if you watch the Nets all season, they switch everything. Like that's mostly what they want to do, right? They want to switch as much as possible 1 through 5. That's what they have the personnel for, especially in their starting lineup. Keeping Claxton home and going away from the strategy, I was like, okay, this is kind of working. They're limiting the touches. But like, as you'll get to here in a second, it was the next part that they just couldn't deal with.
Yeah, and so I mean, you talk about the second chance opportunities, the defensive rebounding for Brooklyn or the offensive rebounding for the Kings, and that's where you're going to look at. You said it before we started here. It was offensive rebounds. Sabonis out rebounded the Brooklyn Nets in this game. So that was the.
Hold on. Here's the number. Like you say, out rebounded. Sabonis had 7 offensive rebounds. The Nets had 3 as a team. 3.
And by the way,
like he doubled. He didn't just out rebound them. He doubled them up in offensive rebounds. Like it's so embarrassing. The Nets had 30. The overall rebounding was actually a little closer to even, but it's these offensive ones, right? Like there's just such killers.
No, and it was funny too, because even when you say it, like he out rebounded offensive rebounds, beat the Brooklyn Nets, and 7's a lot. But you would think in order to out-rebound offensively your opposition, you'd have to be going double-digit offensive rebounds. And that's only had 3. So the contrast between those two ends of the floor and the second chance opportunities, that's really what I think ended up being so difficult to then recover from, because you saw it more in the second half than in the first. First half, it was, yes, the offensive rebounds, kicking out, resetting the offense, and then maybe getting a second chance opportunity for the Kings. The other way that it went in the second half was, and this I think is the wear down effect when you're playing against Sabonis and he wants to be in the paint. He wants to be physical with you. All of a sudden, those offensive rebounds, it became, I'll get the rebound and I'll go up a second time. And I'll get that rebound and I'll go up a third time if that's what it takes. Because at a certain point, the fouls start piling up. He got to the line 9 times and it just becomes... that's the cumulative impact, I think, of that. And there's a demoralizing aspect to it too, right? Again, you do everything correctly. You feel like the strategy is right. You defend it. He misses, and then they get the extra chance, right? And I think that does mentally end up wearing on you. And that's where like some of these lackadaisical fouls or frustration fouls start to come in, especially on the defensive end, when you feel like you're doing it right and you're not getting rewarded by being able to move that ball in transition, have floor spacing, and then attack on the offensive end, where we'll get into in a second. Things did not go according to plan either. And that's just luck or lack thereof when it came to perimeter shooting.
Yeah. Like, so on the season, the Nets, just a couple things. And again, this is going to reinforce you do a lot of things right, but when you have this like sort of total Achilles weakness, right? Like this Achilles heel that they just can't seem to overcome, it's just going to be a problem. And this has been all season long. The Nets rank 27th in opponents' offensive rebounds. The only 3 teams worse are Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and the Pacers. And then they rank 26th in opponents' fifth to last in opponents' second chance points. Only teams behind them: Pistons, Jazz, Pacers, Thunder, like all basically lottery teams, right? And so like this, and by the way, this was a problem when they had KD and Kyrie too. Like it wasn't like just it went away. I mean, of course those guys like aren't centers or anything, but this hasn't been a problem. This has been a problem all season long with this team. They just allowed this to happen time and time again. And tonight it was just so obviously glaring that it just sucks. It sucks because they're like, they can win these games, like, except they just can't secure these offensive rebounds. And it was amazing too. We'll move off this in a second, but it was amazing that the game basically ended like that too, because they're in the middle of this run. They're trying to come back, and the Kings grab like 4 offensive rebounds in under a last minute, and 3 of them were like on one possession.
Eat possessions, eat minutes, eat seconds off the clock.
3 on one possession. 3 were on one possession, and then the last one was on basically the final possession. And it was just like, right, if we're gonna sum up a game, it's like these great defensive stands, this historically great offensive team can't score, and the Nets just can't capitalize on it, and that's just the end of it. So
let's drill down on some of these specific players for Brooklyn, things that didn't work so well for them, some late sequences, and then there's even more statistics here to suggest that the Nets did a lot of other things right, had a lot of things go their way to still come up short, and obviously only being able to put up under 100 points.
All right, Nissan's most electric player of the week, brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria. Now, you think I'm going to say Nissan most electric player of the week is Domantas Sabonis for what he did to the Nets tonight. No. We're going with Nic Claxton in this one. Why? Claxton, 32 minutes, 14 points, 14 boards, a +2 in a game that they lost. And like we just said before, elegant, sleek on that defensive end. They had all the right ideas. It was just securing the final rebounds that they had a problem with. That is what you're going to get with a Nissan Aria. Brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin to your seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com.
Okay, so when we turn our attention then to, we're going to get the individual play. There's some late sequences here, but that tie actually into the theme of just maybe unlucky bounces. A lot of open shots here, especially late. Cam Johnson in the corner. There was some suggestion. I was watching the quick start of the post game of like, was that a foul in the corner? I didn't see any complaints. I didn't see any, irate reactions from anyone. He went down on that shot, but that thing is about as far down as it can go. You see Royce O'Neal and Yuta Watanabe on the bench just about to be elated and then absolutely dejected in the fact that it doesn't fall. But these two teams, by the way, combined for 162 shots, 82 for the Kings, 80 for the Nets. That is not a particularly high number by league average. And when we think about the three-point shooting for Brooklyn, 14 of 39, a lot of volume there. They are, by the way, and this is skewed potentially, obviously going back to Kyrie and Kevin Durant. They sit there in three-point percentage, 4th in the league right now. The Kings are 8th in the league at just over 37%. The Kings were terrible from beyond the arc, 13 of 41. And this is just to reiterate how damning what happened on the defensive boards ends up being, because in a game where the shots weren't falling for them, and a lot of it I actually think was quality defense from Brooklyn, even out on the perimeter, you still end up getting punished because they can put up 41 of those. And the 31% is still enough with all the interior offense that they had going for them. That's both sides of the court and both sides of the three-point shooting. You can pick your poison on which way you want to focus.
Well, just to start, I know this is like the hallmark of sour fans when they just want to say, oh, they missed a lot of easy shots or whatever. Like the Nets really did actually have tons of great looks in this game, and they just really couldn't go down. For whatever, sometimes it just happens. They had at least 5 that just rimmed out. Sometimes that's just the way the ball bounces on a given night. I thought from an offensive standpoint, their looks were pretty clean in this game. The Johnson one was a good look late. Bridges had a bunch of good corner 3 looks where they were able to get good penetration into the paint. And I actually think strategically the Nets, again, have pretty much the right strategy in this game, which was either run. They try to get Sabonis into pick and roll or into switches, not pick and roll. They could try to get Sabonis into switches as many times as possible when they could with a primary ball handler. They wanted to get penetration into the paint either through the primary dribbler or through Claxton on the short roll. They mostly did that. And then ball movement around the arc. I thought that execution was mostly fine. I don't think we saw too much stagnation offensively. It was just when they got to the final piece, and this is kind of similar to the rebounding piece. It's just you kind of do everything right, and then you kind of do everything right, and then you get to the very end of it, and it just doesn't go in. Right?
Yeah.
And so
you and I, we talked about this going back to every iteration of this team. We don't have to keep saying back to the Kevin Durant days. There are some games when you come out of it and you feel like you checked all the boxes. And this is the good possessions, right? That's a good possession. It was a well-run set. The execution was there. The shot doesn't go down. That doesn't mean that steps 1, 2, and 3 were wrong, bad, or not the right decision. It's just that sometimes that's the way it goes. Cam Johnson felt like in this game to be the poster child of like just not quite going down. He was very quiet to start this game. And then when he started getting to the flow in the second half, it was like, 1 or 2 mid-range shots. Was he 4 of 11 from the field? Couldn't get it to go 2 of 6 from beyond the arc. I mean, this was a 36 minutes quiet game from him. And for a team like this, not something that you can afford to have him come in with. And that's not a knock on him, but just a game like that from Cam Johnson is going to start to make it a lot harder for someone else to pick up the slack. The other thing that I think, as much as we're praising what staying at home with Claxton on Sabonis and liking that, something that I thought worked really well for them initially in this game was, again, and we said this before, at least I've noticed it before, the ball movement is there, making the extra pass, the floor spacing. In this instance, I saw a lot of great sequences where it was getting into Claxton in the paint, and he was making the quick decision to outlet it, to get it back out of his hands. Now, there's been plenty of times, had the little mid-range push shot that went for him. He's getting to the basket. He's getting those to go. But in the second half, in the third quarter, when they start bringing the help defense, when Sabonis is already on Claxton, he needs to make that quick, instant decision. I need to get the ball out of my hands immediately because I'm only one outlet pass to the corner and an extra kick to the top of the key away from setting up more of shots that may not fall, but are still the right shots to be in place for this team.
Yeah, because ultimately the Nets just want to bomb threes, right? Like that is what
they would like.
They're not going to ever really have a good interior game with this personnel. They don't have a true like offensive center. We love Claxton. That's just not his game. Since you mentioned before about the 3-point shooting, and this is why Claxton needs to make these reads as much as possible, and why they basically have to make as many reads as they can, because this is just really the best way for them to score. Since the trade, since the Durant trade, which I'll just put as the defining line between like sort of like the old Nets and the new Nets, the Nets rank 6th overall in 3-point attempts, behind some good teams, the Celtics, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Mavericks, right? The Blazers, and then the Nets. Those in that timeline. Now the problem is they're only hitting, so they rank 6th overall in attempts, but they rank 16th in efficiency. So they're just not going down. Again, something to be expected just because of their overall personnel. But in some ways, like we saw tonight from these guys, they are going to kind of live by the 3 and die by the 3. And I do think sometimes those looks are not clean. I don't think all games are put together equally when it comes to this, but like you said, these Cam Johnson shots, a couple of the Bridges ones, even some O'Neal looks that came off really clean.
Yes.
That just didn't go, that just couldn't go down. And I really don't want to throw like dirt on them here because again, I think most of it was fine. We don't say this every game. Sometimes it's just a total grind. Did you get a grindy feeling from this personnel tonight? Like on offense, I did not get that feeling. Like it wasn't a lot of just end the shot clock stuff. It was actually really decisive stuff. Very different actually than we've seen them in the past. Like we know Dinwiddie dribbling it down to the end of the shot clock and stuff. I mean, did you get the sense? Because I think this personnel was like actually kind of gelling really well together. It was just the very final moment where it couldn't come together.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of 7 for Bridges for me on the arc. I said Cam Johnson, 2 of 6, 3 of 7 for Spencer Dinwiddie. 3 of 7's fine. That's fine. But even inside of the shot selection, mid-range, we're talking about perimeter shots. Those are the ones that need to fall. We're going to talk about the bench coming up here in a second. But to your point, I mean, you're talking about 23, 14, and 18 for Bridges, Claxton, and Dinwiddie. I said the 10-point game from Cam Johnson. It's just one more bucket from each of them. Right? It's one more 3-pointer going down for those top 3 guys, Bridges, Johnson, and Dinwiddie, which they're all very capable of hitting one of those shots. Or DFS, who's in the starting lineup, 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. It's just 3 more of those go down, and this thing is going down to the wire, and you get to play the closing sequences a lot differently. Like, right, a lot of times there's a 5-point loss, and those rebounds on the defensive end, the second chance is draining it. But you're playing things so much differently, right? Bridges jacks up a very fast triple because he feels like he needs to go get it. And Jacques Vaughn is imploring everyone to settle down. It's just about the 2-minute mark. But you could feel the team now, again, cumulative impact. You keep pushing and pushing and pushing. You think you're making all the right plays. And when you don't get rewarded with made baskets, then you start to say, well, I'll chuck one because, damn it, one of these has to go in. Maybe I need to stop running quality sets and just go hog wild here. Coming up in a second, we'll discuss the bench players, a new set of individuals that entered into the rotations for Jacques Vaughn and Yuta Watanabe and Edmund Sumner. What did that sample size tell us? Did it confirm some of the things that we have been speaking to about needing to expand the depth that they use?
All right, before we get to that, have you know that this show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, we're going through these times right now. It could be a good time to check in on yourself, try to figure out the lifelong process of just figuring and growing and changing things about you. Therapy is all about deepening that self-awareness and understanding. Sometimes we don't know what we want. Sometimes we don't know why we react the way we do. Sometimes we just need to talk things out. BetterHelp connects you with licensed therapists who can take you on the journey of self-discovery wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be super convenient, it's flexible, suited to your schedule. Look, it's therapy for this day and age, right? Like, you just need to go out there. You need to talk to someone. BetterHelp is the system to use it. You fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, switch therapists anytime for no additional charge to find someone that works with you. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Okay, so when we turn our attention then, I think, to one area, and the last episode, I said, here's the case why Edmund Sumner, and I wanted to get to Yuta Watanabe, but I ended up getting so wrapped up in Sumner because of the backcourt that I didn't even get to flesh out Yuta Watanabe. I thought that this was the exact sample size, even in the loss, of why Jacque Vaughn should be running a deeper rotation. Because in games like these, when the shots aren't quite falling for certain players, and actually, if I go back, I want to make sure I check this on Curry was like the bright spot coming off the bench here. 5 of 10, 3 of 5 from deep. Wasn't sure how many he got up there from beyond the arc. 14 points. But Cam Thomas, again, they bring him in. 6 minutes. He doubled it from the game prior, but he wasn't effective. He didn't look like he could figure it out there. The offense stagnated with him in. Okay. So Jacque Vaughn, after you have Nic Claxton picks up a lot of fouls, so he gets into a little bit of trouble in that regard. You have Finney Smith start to pick some up. We thought, at least initially, I thought that they were going to bring in Yuta to go pseudo small ball 5. Instead, he came in initially for Dorian Finney-Smith and played with Claxton. And guess what? For that little burst, he did all the things that we've seen Yuta Watanabe do throughout the season with the superstars and without them now. He's solid defensively on the offensive end, makes himself available for perimeter looks. Did a great job faking out a shot, driving the lane and dropping it off to Nic Claxton. And then, as we've always said, he's a smart basketball player. When Mikal Bridges drives the baseline, it's Yuta Watanabe that is filling the lane and making himself available for the easy flush. Does that mean that you can go to him for 20 minutes a night? Of course not. But like the 7 minutes and the +2 and the 2 points and the 2 assists and the rebound, that has value. I just thought that this is all you needed to see to suggest that on a night-to-night basis, you can need a spark, and any of these players, 7 through 10, could be that guy on a given night.
Yeah, we said it last podcast that we didn't necessarily agree with the strategy of these super short rotations for this kind of team. I mean, the one thing they have to their advantage is they have a bunch of just pretty good role players on the team, right? Like, none of them are perfect players. None of them are stars down the end of the bench, but they all can play. They just don't seem to play enough. And I just will never understand it. And I agree with you that we finally did kind of, they chose to play slightly different rotations. They started with Cam, went away from that really fast. That's 2 games in a row. We finally see you to come in and play like something like, it's not even real minutes, kind of minutes, like a full rotation, right? A full half rotation or something like that. And Sumner does too. They look super rusty because they just haven't played very much. Like Sumner had a couple,
Sumner
just
especially.
like, Yuta did too. Like Yuta, like let a rebound get out of his hand. Like he missed times on a ball. Like it wasn't perfect. I thought they overall played well. I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying like there was a little bit of rust. It's to be expected. These guys don't play, which is the other case for just playing these guys a little bit more. Like these guys should just play 12, 13 minutes a game, right? Yeah. Like something like that. The Nets are just not the kind of team that should be running a 7-man rotation at this point. We said it last podcast. We've said it multiple times now. And in some ways, this game proved that we're correct, right? That we're correct in this assessment that this team is just not running proper rotations for the personnel that they have. Like they have personnel that's just flexible enough and wing heavy enough to be able to cause some problems on defense for their team. Hopefully ride some hot hands with shooting, from 3. you get a little more rest for some of these guys who got to be getting a little burned out here, like guys like Bridges and Dinwiddie that are just playing massive minutes with a huge load on them offensively. I can't understand it. Like, I don't understand why this is the plan. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, not with this personnel. This is not like a top heavy team. This is like a middling team that has lots of NBA role players on it. Like, why are some of these guys playing 5 minutes a game or not playing at all? It doesn't make any sense.
Even one more guy on the level of a Spencer Dinwiddie, just below a level of a Mikal Bridges. Give me one more at any position, one more player like that, and you can start to make the case for shortening up the rotation. But it just doesn't feel like that should be the case. We'll see what happens going forward here. Rather than belabor this point, because we've highlighted it, now we've got this sample. We'll see where it goes. Let's cover two other topics. The first of which is set your watch to it, my friends. If Doug Norrie and I tell you that something is possible for the Brooklyn Nets, they will immediately do everything in their power to absolutely dumpster that theory, because the Brooklyn Nets are now the 6th seed. They're only a game and a half up on the Miami Heat. Like, they are just dancing on the edge of that play-in game, which just 2 games ago, it felt like, you got this three-game lead over Miami, the Knicks, and we'll be battling with them. And listen, there's plenty of games to go here, as few as they may be, to be able to get back on track and grab a win. This was a winnable game, and that makes it frustrating in and of itself. But worth noting there. The other one, you can give your 2 cents on that. And the other one is, obviously, we might as well cover it before the weekend, that they are intending to sign Moses Brown and try a new guy after not bringing back Nerlens Noel after his 10-day contract.
Yeah, the play-in's going to be a little bit of a sweat here for sure. We never should have locked it up. Maybe we shouldn't have looked. We should have had our eyes going in both directions instead of just up. Obviously, because knowing how the NBA season can go, there's still a lot of games that, like we said before, the Nets' schedule is set to get a lot easier here. Like they've cleared away most of the good teams on the remaining games. They're going to have one of the easier schedules down the stretch. So I think, again, from a soft landing standpoint, the Nets are going to have that. It would have been nice to have pulled out one of these last 2. Yeah. Though at the same time, if we're being fair,
Minnesota and Denver.
I was going to say, we probably penciled that Denver one. The Denver's lost 6 total games at home this year. The Nets were one of them. We probably had penciled that one in for a loss. It gives and it takes, but in general, it would have been. You know what it mostly is? It's mostly when the game looks winnable. That's kind of where that's the only place that I actually push back a little bit, is because if the game looks winnable, that's where it just gets a little frustrating when you're like, hey, it's at home. You maybe have a chance here against the Kings and you don't pull it out.
And by the way, just as the reminder, 4 games coming up. The next 3 will be at home, including this Kings game 4 in a row. Denver, Cleveland, and then Saturday, March 25th at Miami. So what happens over these next 3 games for both teams is going to really tell you how critical that could be and whether or not the Nets do find themselves in that play-in scenario, which, by the way, that is what it is. Again, we'll still end up talking about rotations and why they should be using more players and checking out this depth. And what I did mention yesterday was do it because some of these guys, Sumner, Yuta, they have youth on their side. They're not old players by any stretch. They could still have value for you. When it comes to Moses Brown, are you surprised that they're going to throw another something at the wall here? We talked about this off podcast, so I thought it was worth just crystallizing our thoughts for all the fans. I know they're clamoring for it. This feels different than Nerlens Noel, who's an older veteran. You understand what he is and what he's going to be for you if he can stick around. Moses Brown feels like if he shows us a little something here, it might be nice to have a younger player that could be a part of what we want to try to do going forward. He's been productive at a young age. I think there's still an unknown ceiling for that player as opposed to Noel.
I mean, I don't mind the signing because I think you should just take some stabs at younger guys. I think that from that standpoint, I'd rather try guys like this than Nerlens. I do think and we talked about a little bit of this off air, but the Nerlens one was hey, you're a veteran. We're not going to have to coach you up too much here. You understand a lot of different schemes. It's just, there are advantages to adding guys like that where you just kind of, you're not going to have to do a lot, right? It's this isn't a project, right? It's hey, maybe you just got a little left in the tank. Maybe you don't. We'll see. There's not a lot of risk here. The Moses Brown one's a little different. He's on a younger age curve. Look, my personal feeling is that it probably is just going to look a lot of young Nerlens Noel. I don't think it's going to be very much different, totally different from that respect. I'm not don't think he's going to turn into like the starting center or anything like that. So, but I do in general agree with taking shots on slightly younger guys, because I just think, I don't think there was any chance to like really find something in Noel. There's some chance with these other younger guys that, you know, new scenery and whatever can change the outlook for a dude. So from that standpoint, I'd much rather just trend younger at that position than older.
And I will say, like, him being a younger player, a project, someone, whatever you think that can be. This, unlike the Noel one, feels more of an indictment again around Day'Ron Sharpe. Like, because whatever you think, like, play him. And by the way, like, in the old swath of what you're trying to accomplish here, we know what he can and can't do as of right now. But the fact that you're bringing in a guy who's 25 years old when you have a young player who's been in your system and is there, like, maybe he can continue to develop as well. But at some point, if I'm Day'Ron Sharpe, I'm going, bring in another guy you want to bring in as the big off the bench, like, just over and over again here.
I just think I think it's clear they don't. That's over. Like, you know what I mean? At least for this season, it's done. Maybe forever. Like, in terms of how they view him as like a long-term asset, I don't think they view him as one, right? I think at least that is kind of solved. Now they have team options on him this is Day'Ron for the next 2 seasons. We'll see. This doesn't scream like we believe in the future, right? They just keep signing guys off the street to play in his place. So that's kind of, I probably just tell us the whole story with Day'Ron.
Why don't we go ahead and close out on this? 24 minutes, 4 of 6 from the field, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 10 points. Kessler Edwards.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
24 minutes for the Sacramento Kings and draining triples. Like, that has to be the case. There's 2 guys on the Brooklyn Nets in Day'Ron Sharpe and Cam Thomas that can't find any playing time. And the second round pick that we dumped off to Sacramento with cash is actually hurting us in a game that we kind of wanted to win.
He's playing real minutes. He was awesome the other night against Phoenix. Like, he went 12-7.
We'll talk about this at some point, and the team's different, and he's not whatever. But in the old, like, you just jettison that dude in that moment of trying to do something. With what you kept around, I'm at least going to be mildly irritated that he can function, and we'll see this probably with Cam Thomas. And now I won't be shocked if it happens with Day'Ron Sharpe too.
Yeah, well, it's a bummer way to end it. All right, we're going to get out of here. We'll stick around here on YouTube. Appreciate everyone that's jumped into YouTube live after this game. We'll stay and answer a few questions. If you want to throw them up there in the chat, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets YouTube or Locked On Nets podcast, wherever you listen. Totally free, the best way to help the podcast.
Let's just say I was deeply unhappy, but I didn't know it because I was so happy all the time. That's Harris in LA Story, as performed by Stephen Martin.
Oh, well, there you go. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
LA Story, man. It's a good watch. I think maybe there's an Arquette in there or something. I'm not entirely sure. The bottom line is, guys, podcast for you. If you got comments, shout it out at Locked On Nets. We'll get in there. We'll start a couple of good ones. Hey, Blog gets the first shout. Why? Because he just said something, and I was staring down at the corner when it came up. But you're a frequent flyer with us. Do you think Yuta and Sumner did enough today to maybe change Jacques's mind in adding them into the rotation? My response to that would be, which Jacques Vaughn said in the pregame presser, that part of his process now is going back and he has to reintroduce himself to the new players. He said having the relationship with Spencer is good. That can help facilitate some things. How do I communicate with Mikal and Cam Johnson and DFS, et cetera, et cetera? He knows Yuta. He knows Edmund Sumner. He was on the coaching staff all year. So it's not like there's something that he has to figure out about them. I hope it does, but this isn't like what they did tonight is exactly what they did all year. So I hope it does, but I don't know why this would be the eye opener beyond everything else that you've seen them do up to this point.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna change this. I just don't. I don't think it's really gonna change. It doesn't seem like it. They just don't seem like they want to do stuff like that. They just don't want to run these guys minutes. We just spent 10 minutes talking about it, so I don't think we need to go crazy on this again. But I just don't really seem to understand it. We've been talking about it for multiple games now. It's just not the team that's built like this. Why not play some of these guys? These guys have some value. Some of these guys played major minutes and were really, really. I mean, Yuta was like one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. He might still be up there. He's missed a ton since. But
that, by the way, is like the most shocking thing, just in general, of like to be a guy that was doing that thing and then just not be playing at all. Like there's some historic stuff from this season that we'll get into after the year is over. It's across the board, the layers deep that we could go on shocking things that have occurred on a again, historic level.
Yeah, Adam and I were complaining about it today. We were just like saying like this Nets season is completely unprecedented, from like the player personnel shift, like the player personnel shift in general. Like this never happened before. So that would be like more of an off-season topic. But yeah, this season, I don't think we haven't fully grasped how crazy this Nets season is. There's never been anything like it. Like there's never been anything like what happened with this team this year. Point stop. Like that's it. Like this is a first. It's definitely a first. It's underreported to some degree.
We're gonna put up while you take a look at any comments that you want to get to here, because I was just going to take a quick peek at up until that 25th when they play Miami. Might as well just let the world know that Miami's won their last 2 games, 3 out of the last 4, and they will play at Chicago, at Detroit, home against the Knicks before Brooklyn comes to town. So they've got 3 games. I'd say at least 2 of them are winnable.
This is interesting. I think the Nets need a natural point guard. I always wonder actually about like what a natural point guard is at this point in the NBA. Like I don't think that is. I'm not trying to just dump on Gene here, but Jean. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I actually wonder about if this is like, because I'd be curious like who is a natural point guard at this point, like even in the league, because every team has guys that like play at technically point guard, but every team runs like totally different stuff based on their personnel. I think like this kind of concept is a little dated. Now I think they could use another good like on-ball scorer. Like I think that would really help. Like some of them are dynamic, but like think about like let's just go through the teams the Nets have played in the last 3 games. Like the Kings, Domantas Sabonis, they run as much offense through him as they do Fox. And by the way, Sabonis brings the ball up half the time too. Like, so I know Fox is the point guard, but Sabonis is like the second point guard on this team more than anybody else on the team. OKC Thunder, they kind of run a lot of stuff through Gideon SGA. The Nuggets, who's their point guard? It's probably Jokic. I know that everyone's going to say he's a center and Jamal Murray's the point guard, but Jokic like leads the team in assists and touches the ball every single possession, not under the basket. So like, I don't know. I just find these things to be interesting around like, I think what you mean is like, I think they need someone that's a little bit more creative offensively. Like I would agree with that. like, or like a little more of an offensive hub. I would agree with that. I don't know if like the point guard's a thing, but they just need, they could use some more dynamic offensive players. They have basically like 1.75 of those guys in Dinwiddie and Bridges. Like, I don't think they're not all the way there. So I think maybe that's what you mean, or that's how I interpret it.
Well, it's like, so the one thing I'll say is like, you look inside the Nets right now, their assist stat line, Spencer Dinwiddie leads the team with almost 8. You have to go past Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving in terms of who's on the board there. And then it's Royce with, a little under 4, Bridges with almost 3, Drew Smith averaging 2 per game. Maybe he should be on the court more, but
that's like 2 games. Yeah,
I know. No, I'm kidding. But what I will say is I think wanting another ball handler is all relative to the rest of the team. So for example, if you had a backup center who was a bit of a perimeter shooter and a little bit better on by the way, like Claxton way back once upon a time was a point guard when he was coming up and could do some ball handling back then. It doesn't look like it's ever going to be a part of his game now. But if you have a functional big, if you have a guy that can bang by, you have a Sabonis. If you have a guy like that, then the inside out game is a little bit more effective and you're not as concerned about needing to have guys that can function and facilitate across the board. I think you need to have enough on-ball functionality at enough positions to make so that it works. And for the most part, like Cam Johnson, he's a good example of that. Curry can, at least this version of the team, can do enough of that. Bridges can, right? So like, if you have enough guys that can fill that role to a good enough extent, it's all relative to the rest of the team. And right now, this is an incomplete team. This is not a perfect version of a team, even with whatever level of expectations. They're missing a couple of key pieces to round it out.
Yeah, like look, and Dinwiddie is the point guard, so like I think actually we can pretty definitively say that. So it's not so much that, it's just that like we've been on sort of like team positionless basketball for years now. I mean, dating well back to even before we were even on Locked On Nets on our old podcast. Like we've been talking about this for forever and ever and ever, right? Like you can just have many different ways that you run offense. I think the Nets, because there's a version of like the old Ben Simmons that would look really, really good in this offense. Like the old, not the one from this year.
Not
like
old,
the
not
one from
old Ben Simmons on the Brooklyn Nets.
Like 2 years ago, 2 years ago, a guy that could get into the lane off of like smaller and slower defenders, the guy that can just see over the top of like most other guys that can really take advantage. A guy like him would be like kind of perfect for this team right now. Like the old version of him. He actually would be kind of perfect for that, but he's just not coming back. So I think there's like different variations of guys who would look really good in this offense with this current personnel. And then like every superstar would basically look good. So it's like not so much that, but I'm trying to think of like non-superstar-y guys that would really help unlock some things, because what they don't really have right now is a way to unlock some of the other stuff. Like, because they just don't have, like, after Spencer Dinwiddie, they don't really have much in the way of offensive creation.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. It's to be able to suck in the attention of the defense and open up other opportunities, potentially for perimeter shooters for other guys. Like, that's all it is. It's why, by the way, when Joe Harris does anything other than spot up and shoot triples, you're like, good Lord, like what am I watching right now, right? I will say, first of all, it's the Philly Simmons. That's what you want. You want a little Philly Simmons in your life. And the other one here that I think is interesting, it's just Al Mack says Cam Thomas would be a star on a different team. He'd be a high volume scorer on another team. Like, I think that we said this before. I don't know if we even need to bother talking about it. I find it, I know Al Mack, freaking flyer, but it's like, yeah, like he would be a volume scorer on a bad team. He might be a real spark plug off the bench on a pretty good team. I don't know what he is on a good team, on a team that needs him to be X consistently. And maybe, and that can be because of Jacque Vaughn, because of the Brooklyn Nets. Like, I'm not excluding the Nets for being responsible for what has not been a larger, more consistent sample size with Cam Thomas. But, we saw 3 insane games once upon a time. Outside of that, we've seen little glimpses, and we've also seen bad performances from him. And that's not even a knock on him. Like, he's an up and down player right now. He looked absolutely lost out there tonight. He could not get into the rhythm of the game. That's a problem on a night-to-night basis. So there's still growth for him. I'm not sitting here telling you that he'd be Al, you mean like all-star? This guy's getting all-star votes if he's on another team? I tend to doubt that at this point.
Yeah, it's like chicken or the egg. They're not doing many favors. Like, he's played 6 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Like, you can't have any expectations around a guy. That's the last 3 games. You can't have any expectations around a guy who's just not playing anything like consistent. It would be hard for almost anybody to be good in inconsistent minutes. He played a lot in the Bucks game, was good. Like, when he's able to kind of get out there and play a lot of minutes, we've seen it really, flourish, at least on the offensive end, or at least be on the scoring piece of it, right? Like, he's very single dimensional when it comes to his game, though. Like, he doesn't pass. Like, he doesn't really make good offensive reads. Like, if the shot's going in, it looks amazing, and you wonder. Basically, this is what it is. If the shot's going in, it looks amazing, and you wonder yourself out loud, how is this guy not playing more? When the shot's not going in, it looks so bad, and you're not confused at all. And that's just because his game is just very one-dimensional. He doesn't make the right offensive reads a lot. He can score against almost anybody. That is a real skill. It's a real NBA skill, but he can't be like the hub of an offense, because it's just not. It doesn't punish the defense enough if the shot's not going down. The defense is suspect at best and just bad at worst. And there are definitive things that are holding him back. And he does one thing really, really well that just happens to be the most high profile thing you can do in the game. And that's why we notice it. And it's a compliment. Like, he's really, really good at it. And when you play him 3 minutes a game, he's not going to be able to do it. Like, you just can't get into the right rhythms. But we should not kid ourselves that he's like some like all around, like really polished offensive game. He's very good at scoring. He's not good at the other parts of this. Like, he just doesn't. He can't run pick and roll. Like, it's very difficult for him to find secondary, passes. Like,
he's a high level.
Let's not kid ourselves. He doesn't do those. He just doesn't do those things. Like, he can't run pick and roll. If you're 6'3" and you can't run effective pick and roll, like, your ceiling's limited. Like, that's just kind of what it is.
Well, we can close out on this one. I think it's been a fun session. Nets lose second in a row, but we'll come right back. Denver and 2 games against Cleveland coming up. How far do you guys see this team going this season? Realistically, Doug. Not like the other day when we talked about it, where apparently we're being unrealistic. That's not on you, BMW. That's on us. We drink the Kool-Aid. Sometimes it's poison. We're not necessarily sure. I think, man, I still want to say that they hold on, but TBD after the next 4 games, because that's going to tell you everything that you're going to need to know here. assuming that they tread water across those 4 games and they beat Miami, I think they stay out of the play-in game, but but they're not going anywhere in the playoffs. We talked about this a while ago. Could they win a game depending on matchup? Maybe. I think Doug would say no. But it's just hard because 2 games, they look like they're really finding the rhythm with consistency. And then they give you 2-3 games where there's big 5 to 7 minute stretches where they get absolutely dumpstered, right? They fell apart in the back end of the second quarter of this game. It's why they were all of a sudden down. They were up 9 points in the first half at one point. They trailed by 13 at the break. Like those are big margins, and that happens to any team, but the Nets are not built to overcome that and get back into games. It's really hard. They almost got there in this one, but it's really hard. And a lot of things have to be going right for them. Lucky bounces have to go their way to get there.
Yeah, I think I'm just still in the exact same place I've been, which is they're going to be the 5th or 6th seed and they're going to get swept. Like, I think we've been pretty much consistent on that. Like we talked about, there was a chance to getting to 4, but that was, what's that?
I said, I keep calling for that one win.
Yeah. I mean, if they are the 6th seed and they play one of Boston, Milwaukee, or Philly, I think they definitely get swept. I think I say that pretty confidently. If they make it to the 5th seed and somehow play either Cleveland or Cleveland dumpsters and they play the Knicks or something like that, then I would change my tune a little bit there. Yeah. But if they're kind of headed for the 6th seed, which I probably think is where it's going to land here, I think they just going to face one of those 3 teams and they're going to get killed. And look, I mean, the Bucks are really good. The Celtics are really good. The Sixers are really good. Like the Nets don't have any one of those teams that have the 2 best players in the series, right? Against the Nets. And probably Cleveland too. Cleveland probably have the 2 best players, depending on who you think their 2 best players are. Like any team they play, they are not going to have the 2 best players in the series. When you get to the playoffs, these guys play 42 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's just, the Nets are built on theoretically being able to they don't do it, but they could play the bench enough. Like they just aren't. Once these teams start coming out there and Joel Embiid's plays 38 and 39 minutes and Harden's playing 42 minutes and they just want to sweep the Nets. They're going to have a really, really hard time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't have anything. I don't know if there's anything else. Otherwise, we can tie a bow on this one if we want to. Obviously, this is Friday's episode, so we will be back. Doug will be back on Sunday after the 3:30 matchup, late afternoon game there. And then we'll pivot our opinions right back over when the Nets win that game, and all of a sudden we say, no, but the 4th seed, it is obtainable. And then I think they could probably win a series, 4 games to 3, 7 game sprint. We'll come back and we'll talk
Nets
about all
first seed. If they win the next game, can they get to 1?
You know what? The 1 seed though is kind of out there. It's crazy.
I can squint and see it. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks for everyone for jumping into YouTube. I know, sometimes after the losses it can be a bummer. Had to have everyone get a little therapy session in here. Get into the comments. Really appreciate everyone that just kind of throws all the stuff out there, wants to talk Nets even when the outcomes aren't the very best. We really, really appreciate everyone jumping here over on YouTube. If you're still in the chat and you haven't hit subscribe, make sure you hit subscribe to Locked On Nets YouTube. You'll be alerted to when we're going live. We're going live about every single game, going live right after, including, like Adam said, next Sunday. See you then. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.